since both of you are serious, shall we go through with the divorce? Is that okay? Yes. Thank you. It's good timing for the divorce. This means we can go on our trip next week without sneaking around. Huh? A trip? Well, today both the pregnancy and the divorce are settled. So it's a good time for a trip, right? Once the belly gets bigger, it will be harder to move around, right? That's why we decided to go on a trip before that happens. I was just about to lie to you tonight that I have a business trip next week. I've uncovered my husband's affair, and we are heading towards a divorce. While that's okay, it seems like my husband and his lover think they can say anything in front of me now that I've mentioned divorce. They started blabbering about going on a trip and even that they were planning to lie about it for the trip. Their incomprehensible actions continue afterward. What is this? Having decided on the divorce, I left the house and have been living in a hotel for now. An envelope addressed to me arrived there. When I opened it, a completed divorce paper was inside. I understand wanting to get the divorce over with quickly. But to send the divorce papers during a trip. Are my husband and his lover mocking me? I was disgusted by their actions again, but having the divorce papers in hand earlier is better for me. So, you're saying to file it? Okay. I'll take care of filing the divorce papers and moving out the luggage tomorrow, so don't worry. I decided to make them realize how serious what they are doing, considering their light-hearted approach to affair and divorce. I am Mandy, a 36-year-old pharmacist. Being my age, people often assume I've had a long marriage and have considerably grown children. However, I am actually newly married to my husband, Ben, and it hasn't even been a year. People call this marriage a miracle, and I think so too. The miracle is not just that I got married at this age, but also that my husband is 10 years younger and very handsome. When announcing our marriage, I proudly showed off photos of my husband. That a young man and an older woman like me met was at the workplace. I'm not very proactive, and there are many women at my workplace. Also, most customers at the pharmacy are elderly, so young men rarely visit. Thus, I had no encounters and realized I was over 30. There was a time when I thought I wanted to marry, but as I was satisfied with my job, I thought being single was also fine. Telling myself this for about 2 years, I suddenly encountered a relationship. Excuse me. Please. Yes, I'll take your prescription. My husband, then 24 years old, came to the pharmacy where I work. He was a salesperson involved in an accident while on a business trip, and came to pick up his medication. Young men seldom visit my pharmacy. So, when a handsome man came, we ladies backstage were excitedly whispering about it. However, my colleagues were already married, and it seemed unlikely that a young man would be interested in me. We looked at my husband as if he were a celebrity on TV, just for visual pleasure. So, even though I found my husband attractive, I just handed over the medicines and completed the transaction as usual. His visits for medication continued for a while, leading to more visits to my workplace. Excuse me. Please. Yes, I'll take your prescription. As usual, my husband and I only had work-related conversations. This was the 3rd time my husband came to pick up his medication at the pharmacy. Since my husband's treatments are almost over, he probably won't be coming to the pharmacy much longer. Thinking this might be the last time I can feast my eyes on him, I went to fetch the plaster with the prescription in hand. I noticed a sticky note attached to the prescription while searching for the plaster. The sticky note had alphabets and numbers, so I thought it might be some number related to work. However, there's never additional instruction on a sticky note. Curious, I peeled off the sticky note and took a closer look. and it appeared to be an ID for a messaging app. Wondering why a contact sticky note was attached to the prescription, I asked my colleagues. There was a contact info attached to the prescription. Does it mean the hospital instructed to contact them? My question made the three married people present freeze. Thinking I had asked something out of the ordinary, I panicked. Only to be chided by everyone for bragging. Then, one of the colleagues slammed a piece of paper and a pen on the desk and yelled at me to write down my contact information. That's when I finally realized that the ID written on the sticky note was my husband's contact. It wasn't that I wanted to boast about getting his contact info, nor was I naturally airhead or slow. I simply couldn't believe that my husband would give me his contact info. Understanding the situation, I hurriedly wrote down my contact and, pushed by everyone, went back to my husband. Sorry for the delay. Here's your item for this time. Thank you. I handed over the plaster as usual, maintaining my composure, and he accepted it as usual. The only difference was that I had sneaked a piece of paper with my contact info into the plaster I gave him. That night, I was debating whether to contact my husband or not. Staring at the black screen of my smartphone laid on the table. To be exact, I wanted to contact him but couldn't muster the courage. Desperately coming up with reasons to postpone it. Suddenly, my smartphone lit up and vibrated on the table, startling me. The message was from my husband, inviting me out for a meal. Of course, I had no reason to refuse. After that, my husband kept inviting me out, and we started dating, leading to marriage 2 years later. When we started dating, I asked why a young man like him gave his contact to an older woman like me. I only found out your age when we first went out for a meal. Until then, I thought you were in your 20s. What did you think when you found out? I was surprised you were older. Is that all?
Yeah.
What else? Isn't it natural to approach someone you like? My husband seemed puzzled by my question and responded with a question of his own. It appears that age doesn't matter to him in love and marriage. At that moment, I felt embarrassed for always worrying about my age. Though my concerns about age were resolved, there was another issue on my mind. About the wedding and the cost of starting our life together. Should I contribute a bit more? I found it hard to say directly, so I beat around the bush. My salary is significantly higher than my husband's, and I have savings. This isn't because I'm a pharmacist and he's a salesman, but simply because of our age difference. Naturally, I wondered if my husband was concerned about earning less than his wife. Moreover, since my husband is only 26, he wouldn't have saved much. So I felt bad asking him to share the expenses for the wedding and starting our new life. Why? We can just split it half-half. I'll work hard from now on. Like my concerns about age, this was also an unnecessary worry. My husband dispelled all my fears, and by the time we got married, I had no more concerns about him and could sincerely feel happy. My colleagues and friends all envied and congratulated me on my marriage. I thought we would live a happy married life from now on, but soon the situation started to change. For the first 3 months of our marriage, it was blissful newlywed life. Ben would rush home from work, we'd go out hand in hand on weekends. And he'd help with household chores. The only thing missing for a perfect life was a child. However, given my age, I'm a bit worried about that. But since Ben accepted my age and married me, I suppose he'll be understanding. We decided to put the child topic on hold and savor our current happiness. Now, 3 months into our marriage, our blissful newlywed life is gradually crumbling. Are you coming home late again today?
Yeah.
I'll probably be back around the usual time. You've been coming home too late recently. Even missing the last train and taking a taxi home. What? I'm working hard, and you're complaining? No. It's not like that. Angered by my words, Ben forcefully closed the front door, making a deliberately loud noise. The vibration and draft from the door closing knocked over a photo frame of us on the hallway shelf, gently setting the photo frame upright again. I slowly opened the front door and headed to work myself. Ben is right, complaining about wanting him home early when he's working hard is selfish. But it's not that I want to be selfish. I'm just feeling uneasy because his attitude has changed so much recently. Hey, it's burnable trash day today, and it's your turn to take it out, right? My bad. I'll make sure to do it next time. You said that last time and forgot, remember? What's the big deal if we leave trash in the house for a day or two? It is a big deal. It's unacceptable to leave burnable trash for 3 days. Stop nagging. If you have complaints, why don't you do everything yourself? Complaining to Ben, who's lounging on the living room sofa playing with his smartphone. He makes a face like it's too much trouble and escapes to the bedroom. We decided to share household chores before we got married. I know Ben isn't good at housework. But he said that even if it's tough, we should cooperate if we're getting married. And he set up various rules himself. Those rules collapsed after 3 months, and slowly more chores became my responsibility. It seems I'm doing all the trash duties today. I originally planned to primarily handle the household chores, so I don't see it as much of a problem. The problem is that Ben has changed. He used to be so kind before we got married, so why has he suddenly? I try desperately to shake off the words I don't want to think about that are about to cross my mind. 3 months later, Ben continues to change, and now mere reminders aren't enough. Ben, did you use the household money again? I just withdrew my share of the salary. We need to save for the future. I don't think it's right to spend thousands a month. You earn a high salary, and we don't have kids, so we can live without my salary, right? Ben goes back to lounging on the sofa with his smartphone. He no longer looks at me or talks to me in the house. It's like his smartphone has become his wife. Wherever we go, it's not me but his smartphone that's with him. Stop looking at your phone all the time and look at me when you talk. Shut up. Don't talk to me like you're my mom. Ben walks past me, still looking at his smartphone screen, and goes into the bedroom. I'm left fretting as Ben no longer contributes financially to the household. Naturally, he continues to come home late every day, and on weekends. He goes out alone, no longer spending time with me. Was he bothered by the fact that I earn more? Or is he frustrated because we haven't been able to have children as he mentioned before? I'm reflecting on not taking Ben's words for granted. And thinking maybe I should have been more considerate towards him. However, I soon realized this reflection was unnecessary. A few days later, I was invited to a cafe by a friend. I thought, it's a beautiful day today, and you can see far into the distance. As I was gazing out of the window, I witnessed Ben walking hand in hand with an unknown woman into an obstetrics and gynecology clinic. The woman looked young, probably in her early 20s at first glance. The shock made me grip my coffee cup so hard I thought it might break. Of course, it wasn't a coincidence that I found Ben. The friend who invited me to the cafe works as a nurse at the clinic Ben and the woman entered. I had shown a picture of Ben to my friend before, so she knew both his face and name. When she saw Ben coming to the clinic with an unknown woman, she contacted me. However, she couldn't divulge patient information, even to family. So, she asked me to meet at a cafe from where the clinic was visible. And simply said to gaze out of the window today. I somewhat understood what she meant and kept looking out of the window from the cafe. It was just by chance that Ben and the woman showed up there. I wanted to storm into the clinic right away, but causing a scene there would be a nuisance. Besides, there might be a reason Ben was accompanying a female acquaintance. Therefore, I decided to wait for the two to come out of the clinic. My friend left, and I waited alone in front of the clinic for about an hour. Was Ben really having an affair? Could it be that his affair partner was pregnant? Or was he just accompanying an acquaintance for a checkup? The hour filled with anxiety felt long, and during that time, various thoughts crossed my mind. When Ben and the woman finally appeared, I hastily confronted them. Can you explain why you were at the obstetrics and gynecology clinic? You? Why are you here? Ben, who usually doesn't look at my face and focuses on his smartphone screen, now looks at me with wide eyes. However, I direct my gaze not at Ben but at the woman. The woman looks extremely uncomfortable. Though it's not yet confirmed, I'm bracing myself for the possibility of Ben's affair. We can't talk here. Shall we move over there? I point to the cafe where I was with my friend earlier and lead Ben and the woman back to the shop. We enter the shop, and before starting the conversation, I order the coffee I had an hour ago to calm down. Until the coffee arrived, I remained silent. So Ben and the woman couldn't speak either, both looking anxious. They must feel intimidated by my silence. Once the coffee is served, I take a sip and finally start speaking. What is the relationship between you two? Ben always seemed annoyed by my conversations, so I decided to cut straight to the point. Being 26 and young, Ben could find relationships anywhere. So I'm not interested in where or how they started their affair. I can guess when the affair started from the changes in Ben's behavior. All I want to hear is the result. That is, Ben stammers in response to my question, seemingly flustered. At this point, it seems clear. The woman sitting next to Ben must be his affair partner. And she was the one on the other side of the smartphone screen Ben was always glued to. His late returns, the end of our weekends together, the cessation of financial contributions to the house, all seem to be caused by this affair. The pieces of infidelity and Ben's changes are connecting one by one in my mind. Are you at the obstetrics and gynecology clinic because you're pregnant? That is, Ben squirms, unable to answer. With no clear answers coming from Ben, my irritation grows, and I start drinking my coffee faster. Just as I was about to scold Ben to confess everything, it was not Ben but his affair partner who spoke up. It's already out in the open, and there's no escaping it. So we might as well make things clear. That is, but nice to meet you, I'm Hannah. Ben and I are dating. The last test wasn't clear, but today's test confirmed I'm 6 weeks pregnant. I was taken aback by the affair partner suddenly spilling the truth. My hand holding the cup halted midway. The eyes of the affair partner were serious. She probably sees me as the final boss or a wall she needs to overcome to be with Ben. I understand the seriousness, but from my perspective, it just seems like brazenness. Hearing the words of the affair partner seemed to have given Ben the wrong kind of courage to start being defiant too. We are serious about each other. I really feel bad for you, but can you divorce us for our sake? Ben. You really said it. Thank you. But it's going to be tough from here. Divorce, childbirth, starting a new life, we have a lot to do. As long as I'm with Ben, it will be okay. With Ben acting like a tragic heroine, I almost believe I'm indeed the final boss for them. I knew Ben would go straight once he fell in love. But if a new love arises after marriage, there should be a proper order to things. I glanced outside at the obstetrics clinic and sighed. It seems age does matter in marriage after all. This is not to say that marriages with an age gap are bad. It means caution is needed when marrying someone with the emotional maturity of a childlike love affair. Now that the affair and pregnancy are out in the open, I'd rather be the one asking for a divorce. However, seeing the two of them, their attitudes of not thinking they did anything wrong infuriate me. I can't let them just defeat the final boss and happily ever after. Thinking about making them realize how difficult what they are doing is. I first need to express my willingness to divorce. I understand you two are serious, so shall we go through with the divorce? Is that okay? Yes. Thank you. The two of them cheered and hugged loudly enough to draw attention from those around us. I wish they wouldn't forget we're in a cafe because I'm embarrassed. It's good timing for the divorce, right? This means we can go on our trip next week without sneaking around. Huh? A trip? Well, today both the pregnancy and the divorce are settled. So it's a good time for a trip, right? Once the belly gets bigger, it will be harder to move around, right? That's why we decided to go on a trip before that happens. I was just about to lie to you tonight that I have a business trip next week. My hand went limp and I nearly dropped my cup. Now that I've mentioned divorce, it seems Ben and his lover think they can say anything in front of me. They began to blabber about going on a trip and even planning to lie about it for the trip. We're about to get divorced, you know? There are things we need to discuss. Can't the trip be cancelled? Huh, that's a bit. You're going to make us cancel now? Let us have this trip at least. I sighed, perhaps the deepest sigh of my life. It seems their priority is the trip over the divorce. Do you even understand? The reason for the divorce is because of you two? Then let's quickly settle what needs to be settled now. What do we need to decide? Quickly. Well, what needs to be decided is the division of property. And the compensation for the affair, I guess. Since the apartment is rented, it's just about who stays. I don't plan to stay, so I'll be the one to leave. How much is the compensation for the affair? Hannah, can you look it up? Instructed by Ben. His affair partner starts searching on her smartphone for the compensation for the affair. What an irresponsible discussion this is. However, I decided to watch them warmly. To make them realize that divorce isn't as easy as they think. The internet says it's between $5,000 to $30,000. Does it cost that much? Hey, can we settle for $5,000? I'm not well versed in law, but that might be too little. The compensation can be decided after the divorce since it's more about our future lives I want to decide on, like the house and money. I see. You're leaving the house, right? Then, Hannah and I will live there. Then, I'll leave right after this. I'll move my things out while you two are on your trip. Next is the division of property, right? That's just our savings since we were only married for about 6 months. So splitting it half and half should be fine, right? That sounds good to me. I was internally pleased that I made Ben say what I wanted without any trouble. So, divorce discussions aren't something to be settled quickly. I borrowed an A4 sheet and a pen from the shop to put our discussion in writing. Creating a simple document. It stated that we are divorcing, the cause is Ben's affair, and our property will be split in half. Unaware of anything, Ben signs my handwritten document. Such a document has some legal effect, so I carefully take it from Ben without folding it. I'll go back first to pack up, so let me leave. All right, take care. Thank you for the divorce. I leave the shop with a smile to Ben and his affair partner. The next week, I was still searching for a new house, living in a hotel. Today is the day Ben and his affair partner leave for their trip. So I plan to clean up the old house with movers tomorrow. While checking my schedule for tomorrow in the hotel, thinking about the substantial amount of work, the front desk informs me that I've received mail. It was just one envelope. What is this? Opening it, I find a completed divorce paper inside. I understand wanting to get the divorce over quickly, but to send the divorce papers during a trip. I'm dismayed by their actions again. But having the divorce papers in hand beforehand is better for me. You want me to file it, huh? Okay. I'll take care of filing the divorce papers and moving out the luggage tomorrow, so don't worry. I imagine telling Ben about tomorrow's plans, thinking of his face. When Ben and his affair partner return home, they will surely be surprised and immediately call me. 2 nights later, as I'm relaxing in the hotel, I receive a call from my ex-husband. Hey. What's going on? Everything in the house is gone. That's not true, right? I left your clothes and games on the floor, didn't I? I couldn't help but laugh, imagining my flustered ex-husband's face. From the other end of the phone, I can hear the panic in his affair partner's voice as well. They're likely checking around the house. Their panic is understandable. I dumped my belongings in a storage unit and sold everything that seemed non-essential to Ben, disposing of what couldn't be sold. This included everything from furniture and appliances to necessary items like shower heads and stoves, to kitchen utensils and small ornaments, thoroughly emptying the place. Now, the house looks like it's waiting for new tenants. Why would you do this? You better compensate for everything. Why? I just did what we discussed, right? If we're divorcing, the property should be split in half. Since you sent the divorce papers, the divorce is finalized. So, I made sure to split the property in half for you. What do you mean? Furniture and appliances are marital property, right? We agreed to divide them equally instead of allocating specific items to each other. So I sold everything and turned it into cash. Isn't your clothing on the living room floor? Isn't there no money on top? I could hear hurried footsteps through the phone. It seemed Ben rushed to the living room. Then, after a thud as if he kneeled on the floor, my ex-husband muttered in a barely audible, frail voice. What? $300 and some change? All the house items sold for this amount. That's right. We had some appliances we brought from our own homes when we started living together, right? So, many items fetched a low price. Some were even told would cost money to take away. Most of the miscellaneous goods were not eligible for purchase and were disposed of. I could hear the sound of coins clinking as if Ben's hand had gone limp and dropped them. Even I felt that the total of $600 from selling everything thoroughly was a bit low. However, that's what you get when you use a recycling shop without much thought. If we had used an online auction or a second-hand shop specializing in furniture and appliances, we might have gotten a bit more. But the aim wasn't to sell for the highest price. I wanted to strip my ex-husband of all the essentials and give him as little money as possible. So, I just used a recycling shop without giving it much thought. How am I supposed to live in a place that looks like it's waiting for a new tenant? That's not my problem. We agreed on this, didn't we? Property gets split in half upon divorce. It's written on the document I have. And you signed it, didn't you? Got any complaints? My ex-husband fell silent, unable to retort. Regretting that we had wrapped up the divorce discussions so hastily was too late now. Besides, our divorce discussions are still ongoing. I'd prefer he save his regrets for after everything is concluded. You seem to have completely forgotten, given the trip and the state of the house. But we haven't settled on the compensation for the divorce yet. Right. We haven't decided anything about the compensation yet. Please. Make it cheap. I spent a lot on the wedding and starting our life together. So I barely have any money left. I even used my money for this trip. Now, I have only about $3,000 in total. I get that you want to impress your girlfriend. But spending money recklessly is the problem. Unfortunately, I'll be asking for $25,000 in compensation for the affair. What? $25,000? The marriage was short. But since the divorce is due to your affair and your affair partner is pregnant, I think this amount is fair. If you have any complaints, shall we consult a lawyer? My ex-husband fell silent again, suddenly facing the prospect of being in debt in an almost empty apartment would indeed leave anyone in a daze. Now, my ex-husband needs to start buying furniture and appliances all over again to make the house livable. However, with hardly any money left, my young 26-year-old ex-husband will have to pay a substantial amount in compensation. This makes it seem like it will be a long time before he can afford to furnish a home again. But, as someone who's already divorced, whatever kind of life my ex-husband leads is none of my concern. I'll contact you again about the compensation. After explaining why the house was in such pristine condition, I ended the call. It's a pity I couldn't see my ex-husband's face directly. But this will surely make him realize he took his affair and our divorce too lightly. Later on, my ex-husband agreed to pay $25,000 as compensation for the affair. Consulting a lawyer, I was told I could have asked for more. However, for my young and nearly penniless ex-husband, $25,000 would be damaging enough. I didn't want the money, so I decided to let it go for $25,000. Since my ex-husband and his affair partner are young, I wanted them to join forces and start from scratch. However, it seems things didn't go well for them in the end. The affair partner, being a part-timer, apparently had no savings. My ex-husband only had $3,000, so he couldn't spend freely. After the house was stripped bare, they resorted to using cardboard boxes as a table and cooking with a portable stove since they had no gas stove, living a miserable life. It seems they couldn't handle such a life for even a week and ended up leaving the house. Since the affair partner was pregnant, it was determined that my ex-husband had to pay child support, despite divorcing me with the intention of marrying his affair partner. My ex-husband somehow ended up alone, with his financial obligations only increasing. Moreover, my ex-husband's downfall didn't stop there. He posted pictures of him and his affair partner on a trip on social media, announcing he had divorced me to marry her. Naturally, he faced a barrage of questions about his divorce and remarriage at work. Even if he divorced, once he revealed the breakup with his partner, he was asked about the reason for the breakup. He seemed to evade the questions. But such topics inevitably lead to rumors about the affair, pregnancy, compensation, and child support spreading, showing how curious the world can be. With his reputation tarnished at work, my ex-husband couldn't continue his job and resigned. He needs to find a new job soon since he has to pay for the affair compensation, child support, and secure living expenses. While being passionate and straightforward in love is often seen as good, considering what my ex-husband did and his current situation makes one ponder. I learned a lot from this experience. Some people are suited for love, while others are not. I think both my ex-husband and I weren't suited for love. There are many forms of happiness in today's world, aside from love and marriage. For now, I think having a job is enough, and I continue to devote myself to work.
I'm going to build the ideal family here with my new wife and this child, so we're getting a divorce. You and our son need to leave this house right now, my husband said, raising his voice while breathing heavily. When I was pregnant, he became independent and started a company making children's clothes. Initially, he worked diligently, but now he spends each day playing, and the management of the company is barely surviving. Amid the sadness of hearing about my parents' deaths, he suddenly came to my place with his mistress and their child. Confused, my son and I thought it would be improper to argue in front of the house, so I let the three of them in. Then suddenly he told me and my son to leave the house. It was outrageous for him to say such a thing, given how difficult of a situation I was in due to my parents' passing, and it made me furious. I was stunned and could not reply. However, my son snorted. "Hey, what's with that cheeky attitude?" "Dad, it's impossible to divorce Mom." "What are you talking about? A divorce is just a matter of filing the papers. Don't you even know that, being a high school student?" But as my son began to explain his reasons, my husband's face turned pale. My name is Megan Baker, a 47-year-old part-time working housewife. I help with the family business part-time. I have one child, my son Ryan, who is a 16-year-old high school student. I have been married to Patrick for 17 years. Patrick is the president of an apparel company. Patrick spends his days playing, but he really shouldn't have the luxury to do so. The company's profits are almost non-existent, and its financial state is very precarious. Patrick's income is unreliable, and most of his salary goes to his hobbies, so our household relies on my part-time income. Ryan is very kind and always helps with the household chores. However, he's cold towards Patrick, and they do not speak to each other. Initially, I thought it was just a rebellious phase, but since he's kind to me, I believe he dislikes Patrick. Soon after starting high school, Ryan began working part-time. Patrick and I met at work. I was working as an editor for a fashion magazine, and Patrick was a designer at an apparel company. Our first meeting was during a meeting to discuss featuring his company's products. At that time, we were discussing a feature on date outfits. The key to this outfit is matching the color of the shoes and the skirt to make the legs look slimmer. The color is white, which I think adds a sense of purity. That sounds great. The focus is clear, and it seems like we can make an easy-to-understand feature. Thank you. It's been a while since we had such a meeting, so I've prepared various things. Patrick was very serious, and he made many suggestions during the meeting. Seeing him like that, I imagined that building a family with him would lead to a fun future. One day, there was a dinner between my company and Patrick's company, and after getting a bit drunk, Patrick became jovial and shared something with me. "I want to dress my children in the clothes I design, so I hope to marry a wonderful wife and have cute children someday." "Patrick, have you ever designed children's clothes?" "Yes, I was in charge of designing children's clothes when I first joined the company." "That's a wonderful dream. I would like to help make that dream come true." "Megan, you also have a wonderful dream." After that, Patrick asked for my contact information. We got along well from there, and eventually Patrick confessed, and we started dating. We were both approaching our 30s and got married less than a year after we started dating. I got pregnant soon after we got married. During the early stages of my pregnancy, I temporarily quit my part-time job and suffered from morning sickness. Patrick, what brought you home this morning?" "I've decided to quit my job and go independent. I think now is the time to make my dreams come true." "Go independent? At a time when we're about to have a baby? I was taken aback. It's okay. One of my clients told me they have work they want me to do, so there will be work. I see, but setting up an apparel company requires a lot of preparation, right? Like, you need to build an office and buy equipment. True, but I don't have much money for preparations. I was a bit disappointed by Patrick's lack of planning, but I desperately researched where we could borrow money from. However, we were turned down by all the banks. Resigned to being rejected, I consulted my parents. Then they agreed to help Patrick establish his company. I'm really grateful for my parents' kindness, probably because they were also excited about the arrival of their grandchild. Patrick worked hard every day for the child that was about to be born. Sometimes he came home late from work, but he never complained, even when morning sickness prevented me from preparing meals. On weekends, he actively did the laundry and cleaning. However, his attitude changed dramatically one day. It was the day I gave birth to our child. That night, when my water broke, Patrick immediately took me to the hospital. Patrick, is it really okay with your work? It's fine. There are no negotiations or urgent jobs, so I'll stay with you. Also, don't worry about me. Worry about yourself now, Patrick said kindly, holding my hand tightly as I struggled through labor. A few hours later, the delivery was successful. Congratulations, it's a healthy boy. A boy? Yes, a healthy boy. Is there a problem? The nurse tilted her head, but Patrick's solemn expression did not change. In fact, Patrick had been hoping for a girl ever since I became pregnant. He often handled girls' clothing projects at work, and since becoming independent, he had been working as a designer specializing in girls' and children's wear. Throughout the pregnancy, all the children's clothes designs were for girls, and Patrick had convinced himself that a girl would be born. We moved to the hospital room, but Patrick's disappointed expression did not change. Patrick, it turned out to be a boy. I'm sorry. Why isn't it a girl? There's nothing we can do about it. The gynecologist said there was a high chance it would be a boy, and we can't control the gender of the child. Then put that child in a baby hatch until a girl is born. What? I would never do such a terrible thing. Whether it's a boy or a girl, this child is my irreplaceable child. Patrick gradually began distancing himself from me, and I ended up raising our child alone. Thinking Patrick's depression was temporary, I continued to work hard on household chores and childcare, supported by my parents. I also returned to my part-time job and worked hard every day. My workplace was supportive of my childcare efforts, and when Ryan was young, I could even bring him to work. However, even as Ryan grew older, Patrick paid no attention to the family. Eventually, Patrick began to spend more nights away from home, and the number of mornings he returned home decreased. Dad, I won a gold medal in the summer vacation art contest. Huh? So what? What do you want to say? What do I want to say? Oh, I see. Are you bragging that you have more artistic talent than me? No, that's not what I meant. Patrick, don't trouble Ryan. Why don't you praise him a little? Enough already. Yes, it's a nice drawing. Patrick sat grumpily and slammed the door. His attitude towards Ryan was terrible, and he never participated in any of Ryan's school events. Entrance ceremony, parent-teacher day, music recital, graduation. There was no sign of his father at any of these events, which Ryan found unsettling. Ryan began to sense that his father disliked him, and gradually he started to despise his father as well. Then a major turning point arrived one Sunday while I was preparing dinner. Hello, sister? Megan, Mom and Dad have passed away. Passed away? The sudden news left me in shock. They had been helping us out ever since Ryan was born. I hadn't even been able to show them gratitude, and now they were gone. I was at a loss for words. Why? They were fine when we saw them at Christmas. It seems they were hit by a car that ran a red light. Can you come to the hospital right away? Patrick and Ryan haven't come home yet, so I'll head there as soon as they're back. I hung up the phone with trembling hands. When will Patrick return? He hasn't told me when he'll be back, so I don't know when I can go to the hospital. I tried calling Patrick, but I couldn't reach him. He doesn't even read my messages. In such a difficult time. While I was irritated, I was also sinking into sadness. Mom, what's wrong? Sorry, don't worry about it. What was that call about earlier? Actually, your grandparents have passed away, so we'll go to the hospital where they are once your dad gets back. Okay. Ryan sat down on the sofa with a sad face. Then I heard a car stop. Looking out the window at our driveway, I saw Patrick's car. Good, Patrick is back. Wait, what? Next to Patrick was a woman dressed in high-end brand clothes and flashy nails. Clearly a woman who liked to show off. There was a child wearing pink clothes next to the woman. Could she be an acquaintance of Patrick? Is the child hers? But Patrick was holding hands with the woman. Who is this woman? My mind was in turmoil and I started to panic. Hey, Megan, it's me, open up. Without ringing the doorbell, Patrick was rattling the front door. To avoid any further commotion, I hurriedly opened the door. Patrick, welcome back. It's a tough time right now, but who is this? I stared at the woman next to Patrick. She looked confident, as if she had been meeting and tightly gripped Patrick's arm. Nice to meet you. I am Ashley, Patrick's wife. Hey, Ashley. Wife is a bit too soon, don't you think? Patrick and Ashley began to flirt in a cloying tone. And it was a child next to Ashley. Sarah, say hello. Nice to meet you. I'm Sarah. Sarah is the child Ashley and I had together. Unlike you, Ashley actually gave me a daughter. A child? My body stiffened. Had Patrick really fathered a child with his mistress while he was away from home? Hey, Megan, I need to talk, so let us in. Alright. Since we couldn't keep talking in front of the house, I followed Patrick's instructions and let him and his mistress into the house. Huh? A guest? Yes, it seems like your father brought his mistress. Mistress? That's being cheating? Seems so. We're about to have a detailed discussion now. Can I sit in on this? If you want to be there, Ryan, that's fine. I hesitated to let Ryan be part of what might turn into a very tense situation, but seeing his serious expression and realizing he was old enough to understand, I decided to let him sit beside me. We moved Sarah to another room and sat down. Ashley opposite me, Patrick opposite Ryan. Patrick seemed displeased that Ryan was there, but I decided to proceed with the discussion anyway. I'm going to build the ideal family here with Ashley and Sarah, so Megan, I'm divorcing you. You and Ryan need to leave this house right now. Patrick, you're so cool. Patrick was raising his voice while breathing heavily. Ashley looked at him with sparkling eyes, clearly smitten. I was completely fed up with their foolish behavior and couldn't stop feeling nauseous. Despite the grave situation of my parents' deaths, such outrageous statements from my husband infuriated me. I was too stunned to respond. However, Ryan snorted. Hey, Ryan, what's with that insolent attitude? Dad, it's impossible to divorce Mom. What are you talking about? A divorce is just a matter of filing out a form. Don't you know that, even as a high school student? Dad, you still haven't repaid the money Grandpa lent for your business, have you? Patrick's face turned pale immediately. Ashley looked bewildered. I almost burst out laughing at the temperature difference between their expressions. Actually, the funds my parents had lent were supposed to be repaid gradually as the company stabilized. A promise Patrick made when borrowing the money from them. But Patrick had been making excuses to delay repayment. Dad, were you trying to escape repayment by getting a divorce? But that's not going to work. Grandpa told me to make sure you pay it back. When did we make that agreement? Were you with my father-in-law when I wasn't around? I've been meeting Grandpa and Grandma quite often. Where did you meet them? At my part-time job, Grandpa's company. That's a lie. I never knew that. Indeed, Ryan had been working part-time at his grandparents' company. Seeing me support the family, Ryan had wanted to help me someday. When he entered high school and expressed a desire to work part-time, I suggested he work at my parents' company. They were delighted to have him, as it would also serve as training to take over the business. At first, Ryan was given simple office tasks, but he also handled advice on new products, a task suitable for a young person, and he enjoyed his work. Since starting his part-time job, Ryan had looked more dependable. His statements were more assertive than anyone else's, and I felt tears welling up with pride at how well I had raised him. So, Patrick, please make sure to repay the $100,000 you borrowed from my parents, okay? Encouraged by Ryan's words, I delivered the final blow to Patrick. Patrick, what do you mean? You told me you were a director at a major apparel company earning $100,000 a year. Is it true you have $100,000 debt? Ashley, it's not like that. What she's saying is nonsense. Should I bring out the evidence? I have the repayment pledge for the funds here in the house. Stop it, Megan. Ignoring Patrick's words, I showed the repayment pledge we had signed when we received the financial support from the drawer. Patrick collapsed to his knees. There's no way I can pay such a huge amount. It's obviously impossible. Patrick, this is true then. Dad, as I said earlier, you can't get a divorce until you pay back the money. Shut up, Ashley. Could you take on my debt? I'll pay it back quickly for Sarah's sake. Ashley, how about that? And then we can get married right away, right? Ashley's face gradually turned red. Patrick, you liar. I didn't know about this. First of all, I didn't make this debt. Patrick and Ashley suddenly started arguing. Ryan looked on with a disgusted expression, as if looking down on both Patrick and Ashley. For Ryan's sake, please don't show such an ugly sight anymore. I carried Sarah from another room and kicked Patrick, Ashley, and Sarah out of the house. Mom, we should hire a detective to claim compensation from Dad. Yes, I'll think about it. I felt proud of my son's dependable appearance. Then I made a phone call. Hello, it's me. Could I ask you for a little favor? After I explained the situation to the person on the phone, they said, "Understood. I'll start moving on it tomorrow," in a kind voice. Since then, I spent several busy weeks. There were mountains of things to do, including my parents' funeral and taking over the company. I went to bed late and woke up early, continuing to suffer from lack of sleep. I came down with a cold and couldn't go to work for a while. Ryan took care of me after school, doing household chores. As I ate the rice porridge Ryan made, the doorbell rang. Megan, open up quickly. I staggered to the door, despite feeling unsteady. I slowly opened the front door. What's the matter, Patrick? Why have you come so suddenly? What do you mean my company has been razed to the ground? Where did my company go? Company? What are you talking about? You don't have a company. Did you do something? Don't just get rid of the company I started for my dream. Despite being sick, Patrick grabbed my collar. As I coughed, something seemed to dawn on him, and suddenly he pushed me away. I stumbled and fell to the floor. What? You have a cold? Don't pass your filthy germs to me. It's disgusting. Isn't that a terrible way to treat Megan? It's rude no matter what. Christina, what are you doing here? Emerging from the back of the room was my sister, Christina. She has always been strong in her sense of justice and is very strict with people who do not keep promises or follow rules. Since Ryan was born, the increasingly negligent Patrick had been quite afraid of her. Why are you in the house? Could you stop rampaging at the door and come inside to talk? Overwhelmed by my sister's pressure, Patrick shrank and entered the house. His expression was like that of a small animal terrified of its natural predator as he trembled and looked at Christina. Christina, why are you here in the house now? I needed to discuss the company handover with Megan. Company takeover? What do you mean? Yes, actually, I have merged and absorbed your company. Merged and absorbed? I haven't heard anything about that. Patrick's shoulders shook uncontrollably. I almost wanted to laugh out loud because it was so satisfying, but I restrained myself to avoid getting scolded by my sister in front of him. In fact, Christina had been managing Patrick's company for quite some time. Because of his affair, Patrick had neglected the company's management, leading it to almost constant deficits. I, who had been diligently working part-time, hadn't noticed. But when Christina investigated Patrick's company, she found it was drowning in deficits. Knowing a lot about business management, Christina thought she could turn around Patrick's company. Patrick's management was terrible, but the quality of the products he made is quite good. So I thought it might be good to try and rebuild it under my company. But absorbing it like that without permission is illegal. I'll sue. Well, why don't you check the repayment pledge agreement first? Megan, give me the repayment pledge agreement. I pulled out the repayment pledge document from the drawer as Patrick asked. When Patrick saw the pledge, he widened his eyes as if he had seen something he shouldn't have. What is this? The pledge stated that the company was in my parents' names. Yes, Patrick's company had been established under my parents' names. Actually, all the procedures and necessary administrative tasks for setting up the company had been done by my parents and sister. Thus, they were able to change the company's registration to our parents without Patrick knowing. After our parents passed away, Christina inherited half of their estate, including Patrick's company. At first, Christina was hesitant about merging and absorbing the company, but I told her about Patrick and consulted her about wanting to get rid of his company on my own. That's when she told me about the inheritance. So my company has become Christina's property? Yes, and Patrick, you will need to leave the company. Christina, could you at least hire me as a designer? Patrick suddenly became humble. However, his intentions were clear. Christina glared at him. Obviously not. This is all part of the strategy to oust you, so there's no way we can hire you, Patrick, so I'll become unemployed? Yes, well, good luck. Patrick looked utterly desolate. By the way, Patrick, there's something I want to show you. I pulled out several photos from an envelope. The photos showed Ashley with a man who was not Patrick walking into a hotel and enjoying shopping. Moreover, the partner was different in each photo. Men older than Patrick, men younger. It was clear that she had relations with many people. When I first saw these photos, I was fed up with Ashley's irresponsibility. Patrick looked at the photos in astonishment. She was walking with a man who isn't me? This isn't some kind of montage, right? Actually, I hired a detective agency to gather evidence of your affair. It turns out Ashley has been involved with multiple men. She might be what you'd call a sugar baby. So Sarah's father might not be me? It seems so. The detective said it's not you. Maybe you should get a DNA test done. Patrick's face looked like he was about to cry, so I decided to deliver the final blow. Patrick, I can no longer stay married to you. I'm asking for a divorce. Additionally, I'll need compensation and child support for Ryan, along with repayment of the capital that my parents fronted. I can't possibly pay such a large sum. Megan, please give me another chance. It's impossible. I'm completely over you. As Patrick broke down crying on all fours, Christina looked on, dumbfounded. Patrick, no matter how much you struggle, it's useless. The damage you've done to Megan can't be resolved with money. So, at the very least, take proper responsibility. Patrick turned to Christina, tears streaming down his face. Then he shakily sat back down in his chair and slowly signed the divorce papers I had prepared. After that, Patrick had to take out a large loan to pay the compensation and the funds. Initially, I thought installments might be okay, but Ryan stopped me. Do you think someone as irresponsible as that can pay in installments? He'll definitely default. Realizing he was right, I demanded payment in full, as Ryan suggested. Patrick's parents cared about public perception and did not shoulder his debts. Now jobless, Patrick tried to find new work, but having been practically unemployed for over 10 years, no company would hire him. Instead, he seems to be scraping by with jobs introduced by debt collectors, apparently in a somewhat shady line of work. I also filed for damages against Ashley. Ashley, too, took out loans, working as an office worker by day and at a nightclub by night. Incidentally, the DNA test for Sarah, as the detective said, confirmed that Patrick was not her father. Now I'm in charge of my ex-husband's company, which Christina entrusted to me. Ryan is in charge of proposing new products as a part of supporting the company. Mom, I want to use softer materials for the next product. That's a good idea, let's try it. Working with Ryan is truly enjoyable and he inspires me daily. So what shall we do today? I stay motivated by the joy of working, spending each day actively.
I'm going to marry your sister. ATM is no longer needed. I could hear laughter on the other end of the phone. Yet, I didn't express any surprise. I thought that if I fell into their trap, it would weaken my position. And now, I didn't feel even a trace of love for Daniel. Okay. Get ready for this. I replied nonchalantly, but inside, I was burning with rage. Daniel had been enjoying an affair with Mandy, dumping all the childcare, elder care, and housework on me. I couldn't forgive Mandy, who had borrowed money from me and in the end called me an ATM after having an affair. You're okay with us getting divorced, right? When Daniel pressed me like that, I nodded and said, yes. On the other side of the phone, I could hear the two of them rejoicing. They won't be laughing for long. There's no way they won't receive divine punishment after demeaning me like this. I was biting my lips tightly. My name is Hillary Fisher. I'm 60 years old, living with my husband Daniel, who is 5 years older than me. Our son, Ben, is 30 years old this year and has already moved out. Until recently, I was working part-time at a supermarket. But due to the recent rise in prices, I was forced to retire early due to personnel cost reductions. I had worked there for many years, and the manager, who was very kind to me, even gave me a severance package, despite being part-time. It was a bit disappointing to retire before reaching the official retirement age. But working at the supermarket definitely helped me grow. I'm very grateful to the manager who kept employing me. You might think I'm about to enjoy a slow life in my old age, but actually, I'm currently facing some problems at home. Or rather, with my husband. I'm very anxious about whether we can continue living together for many more years in this cold marital relationship. I want to explain everything in order. I met my husband Daniel about 40 years ago. At that time, I was a student looking for a job. And I went around talking to various working adults from different industries. The seniors I talked to were mainly from the newspaper club I was part of. The alumni often showed up at our club drinking parties, and Daniel was one of them. Hillary, what kind of company do you want to work for? Daniel, who was rumored to be the handsome senior in the club, asked me this with an appropriate distance. I honestly told him that I wanted to work for a stable company. Then how about my bank? Being a banker is the most stable job, right? Indeed, it seems like a solid job. I responded with a typical comment, but I was happy that Daniel invited me to apply to his bank. Encouraged by him, I applied and successfully got the job. It wasn't too difficult to get an offer since my university had many students hired by that bank. Once I started working at the bank, I saw how popular Daniel was. He was always being invited out for drinks after work. And it seemed impossible for me to get close to him. However, Daniel often asked me out, and despite feeling guilty towards his other fans, I started going out to eat with him more and more since I was interested in him. This led to us dating, and 3 years later, we got married, and I quit the bank. I regret quitting my job after only about 4 years, but back then, most women quit their jobs when they got married. Especially since Daniel and I worked at the same place. It seemed better to him if I worked part-time elsewhere. I had no regrets about marrying Daniel, though. For a while, we enjoyed our life together, but around the time I turned 30, I got pregnant with our eldest son, Ben, and gave birth. Until then, Daniel had treated me like a princess, but as soon as the child was born, he started acting coldly. Can you make milk for Ben? Milk? That's a mother's job. Why do I have to do it? I was filled with shock rather than sadness or anger at his 180-degree change in attitude. I had heard that men can lose interest when their wives give birth. But I thought that was only true for a limited number of couples. I never imagined that Daniel, who had loved me so much, would suddenly throw me into the sea after I had our child. The days that followed were tumultuous. Daniel literally did not help with childcare at all. Childcare is a mother's job. Besides, you're a full-time housewife, so it's natural for you to take care of it. I'm busy with work. Although Daniel came up with plausible reasons, I couldn't accept them. Even so, it's hard for me alone, as it's my first time taking care of a child. As I said this, watching Daniel's reaction, he glared sharply at me. If it's that hard, why don't you go to my parents' house? My dad's free, he can take care of it. Your father?
Yeah.
That's right. I couldn't hide my surprise at Daniel's suggestion. His mother had passed away early, and his father, who was the only one left, had recently injured his leg and might soon need care. I couldn't believe he was suggesting that his father, in that condition, should take care of our child. However, Daniel made no effort to be involved in childcare at all, merely passing the responsibility to his parents. I was at my wit's end with Daniel's absurd ideas. Since then, I received almost no help with childcare from Daniel, and I was left to raise Ben on my own, consulting childcare books. Fortunately, Ben was a well-behaved and honest child who listened to me and grew up straight and true. When Ben turned 5, after sending him off to kindergarten, I noticed a missed call on my phone. Hello, Hillary? It seems my father has collapsed. I'm thinking of putting him in a facility, so could you handle the paperwork? What? Collapsed? Is he all right? And a facility? I was shocked and my heart raced at the news from Daniel. My father-in-law collapsing was no small matter. I wondered if he had been taken to the hospital properly. Given my father-in-law's bad leg, it must have been a serious situation. He always treated me like his own daughter. And I would regularly take Ben to see him without Daniel having to ask. It takes about 40 minutes by car from our home to my in-laws. Each time we visited, my father-in-law would greet us with a gentle smile and thank us for coming such a long way. Ben and I both loved my father-in-law and, despite the distance, we were always willing to visit him. Hearing that he had collapsed filled me with anxiety. But Daniel only conveyed the practical matter of putting him in a facility, which irritated me. It's fine, it's fine. I'm heading out for some visits now. Take care of it, will you? Wait a minute. Daniel quickly ended the call after saying only what he wanted to. The idea of putting my father-in-law in a facility was unthinkable to me. Unless it was his own wish, it seemed that Daniel was considering it on his own accord. After much thought, I decided that once my father-in-law's condition improved, I would take care of him myself. When I visited the hospital where my father-in-law was sent, he had already regained consciousness in his room. He had turned 70, but he was struggling to continue the family business of farming. Daniel and I had both been asking him to rest due to his bad leg. But it seemed he had gone out to the field even on that day. Hillary, I'm sorry for causing you trouble. No, it's fine. Please, don't overdo it anymore. My father-in-law, duly chastened by this incident, stopped going out to the field after being discharged. His field was no longer a place for growing crops, just empty land. It could be used again with some care, but since the land would likely be passed on to Daniel, his only son, I didn't think Daniel would take up farming. Feeling sorry for the abandoned field, I decided it was for the best if it meant my father-in-law wouldn't harm himself further. Thereafter, I started taking care of my father-in-law, visiting my in-laws about 3 times a week. Around this time, I also began working part-time at a supermarket. So I had to juggle part-time work, childcare, elder care, and household chores. For childcare, I had switched Ben from kindergarten to daycare, where he could stay longer, allowing me some flexibility. I worked part-time 4 times a week, from morning until just afternoon. And then I'd head to my in-laws' house after work. I would pick up Ben from daycare before returning home to cook dinner. It was a tough routine at first due to my inexperience. Although it got somewhat easier with time, I was gradually accumulating fatigue without realizing it. I no longer had the energy to converse with Daniel. And every day I was fully occupied with the immediate tasks at hand. 10 years passed in this way, and I turned 45, while Daniel turned 50. By then, Ben had grown into a mature middle schooler, occasionally showing defiance. But I saw this as a sign of his striving for independence. And while it made me feel lonely, I was happy about his growth. However, Ben never defied Daniel, nor did he even talk to him. Since Daniel had abandoned all childcare responsibilities to me from the start, Ben didn't seem to regard Daniel as a father. It was around this time that our already strained marital and familial relationships entered a crisis. It all started when I received a phone call from my sister Mandy. Hello, Hillary? I went to Hawaii with some friends recently and wanted to give you a souvenir. Can I come over? Mandy, my older sister by 3 years, has always been extravagant with money and had a fiery temperament, making us quite incompatible. She always wore heavy makeup and, unlike me, was very beautiful. Her offer to bring a souvenir from Hawaii seemed suspicious, but I couldn't dismiss her goodwill and agreed. Mandy came over on the weekend and gave me the souvenir, which I realized was not from Hawaii but rather something that seemed to be sold in the States. Thinking that pointing it out would surely upset her, I remained silent. Hey, Hillary. I'm in a bit of a pinch this month. Can you lend me some money? So, this was her plan all along. Lend you money? Why? I suspected it was just her usual overspending. You see, I've been feeling unwell lately. The doctor said I might need to be hospitalized. But I don't have insurance, and I can't afford the hospital and treatment costs. As she said this with slumped shoulders, I couldn't find the words to reply. I wondered what illness required her to be hospitalized. I stared at Mandy in silence for a while, but she looked at me with pleading eyes. All right. Just make sure you pay it back after you're treated. Thank you. Sisters are the best. Mandy suddenly brightened up, grabbed my hand, and shook it vigorously. Even though we didn't get along, she was my sister. And I wanted her to get well soon if she was sick. By the way, when is Daniel coming back? After learning I would lend her the money, Mandy asked this as if it were an afterthought. He just went to the deli. So, I'll just say hello and then I'll be going. Just then, the sound of the front door opening signaled Daniel's return. Hello, Daniel. Oh, Mandy. You're here. Yes, I just had something to discuss with Hillary. I'm done now, so I'll be leaving. As Mandy stood up and passed by Daniel, it looked like she whispered something in his ear. After Mandy left, I asked, "What did Mandy say to you just now?" But he evasively replied, "I don't know. It wasn't anything important." Although I was curious, by the next day I had completely forgotten about it. It was a month later when Daniel and Mandy's affair came to light. I had planned to visit my father-in-law that day. But because my part-time work hours were extended, I decided to visit my in-laws the next day and went home as usual. Ben was at his tutoring classes, and only Daniel was supposed to be at home. Why are there women's shoes here? The moment I took off my shoes at the entrance, I was horrified to see a familiar pair of shoes. They were the heels Mandy had worn over the weekend. Swallowing hard, I entered the house to find the living room empty, which briefly relieved me. But then, I heard Daniel and Mandy's indiscreet voices coming faintly from the bedroom. And I was shocked. What are you doing? I considered storming into the bedroom right then, but at the last moment, I hesitated. What if exposing their affair now led to a divorce? Ben wouldn't want to go with Daniel. But if he came with me, I wasn't confident I could afford his tuition on my own. Even if I divorced, I wanted to wait at least until Ben had graduated from college. Regretfully, I decided to leave the house and pretend I hadn't seen anything. Instead, I gathered evidence of the affair, taking photos of the traces left behind, and secretly checking Daniel's phone to save his exchanges with Mandy. It appeared they had been having an affair for about 6 months. While I felt boiling anger, I repeatedly told myself it was for Ben's sake and endured the days without exposing their affair. 15 years passed, and Ben had become a respectable working adult. He had quit his job soon after joining and started his own business, now working hard as its CEO. I had retired from the supermarket as usual, but was working a little at Ben's company. I had been giving Mandy occasional treatment fees, but as her demands became persistent, I grew tired of lending her money and started ignoring her calls. In fact, the signs of Daniel and Mandy's affair had disappeared about a year after it was discovered. Daniel probably got bored of Mandy. He changed his mind and chose to stay married to me. Knowing this, I no longer felt the urge to confront them about the affair, and decided to turn a blind eye to Daniel and Mandy's relationship. However, I realized my naivety after hearing about my father-in-law's death. I learned about my father-in-law's passing through a phone call from Daniel during the day. He had passed away peacefully at 95, but I was deeply shocked, having cared for him for many years. Unlike Daniel, my father-in-law was kind and considerate. and I mourned as if I had lost my own parent. Yet even at such a time, Daniel said, laughing, "Dad seems to have saved up quite a fortune, so it's something to look forward to." I was so angry that I thought of giving Daniel a piece of my mind. But then I noticed a woman's laughter coming from beside him. "Oh, have we been found out?" Hearing Mandy's unmistakable voice, I felt a chill down my spine. So Daniel and Mandy's relationship hadn't ended. They had been secretly continuing their affair for the last 15 years, right under my nose. Knowing this, the two of them seemed like enigmatic beings to me. "I'm going to marry your sister. The ATM is no longer needed." I could hear their mocking laughter on the phone. Yet, I didn't express any surprise. I thought that if I fell into their trap, it would weaken my position. And by now, I didn't have a shred of love left for Daniel. "Okay. Get ready for this." I replied nonchalantly, but inside, I was burning with rage. Daniel had been enjoying an affair with Mandy, dumping all the childcare, elder care, and housework on me. Mandy, who had borrowed money from me and in the end called me an ATM after having an affair, was unforgivable. "You're okay with us getting divorced, right?" When Daniel pressed me like that, I nodded and said, "Yes." On the other side of the phone, I could hear the two of them rejoicing. They won't be laughing for long. There's no way they won't receive divine punishment after demeaning me like this. I was biting my lips tightly. After my father-in-law's funeral, I submitted the divorce papers as promised. When I informed Daniel, he feigned happiness. "Now that we're divorced, you should move out of the house quickly." "Move out, me?" I asked in surprise, and Daniel nodded, "Of course. I'll be living with Mandy now. You're on your own. This house is too big for one person." Frustrated beyond anger, I simply replied, "Okay," without the will to argue, and complied with Daniel's demands. Although I was furious, I had already considered my living situation before the divorce. I left the house and headed to Ben's place, having informed him in advance. He welcomed his mother, who had split from Daniel and moved in. He was truly a kind son. I vowed to work even harder at Ben's company than before. A few days later, I received a call from a man claiming to be a lawyer. When I met him at the designated location, Daniel, Mandy, and the lawyer were seated. "I am in possession of a will from Mr. Daniel's father." The lawyer said this and took out the will written by my father-in-law from his bag. I was surprised, not knowing my father-in-law had left a will. As Daniel's only child, he was the sole legal heir to my father-in-law's estate. No longer being Daniel's wife, I had no expectation of receiving any inheritance. Wondering why I had been called, I listened as the lawyer began to read the will. The contents were astonishing. Surprisingly, my father-in-law had left a will bequeathing half of his estate to me. This meant that the field he owned became part of my assets, while there is a reserved portion of inheritance, meaning that Daniel would also inherit half. It was a bolt from the blue for him, who expected to inherit everything. Why does Hillary inherit half? I'm the only son, I should receive it all. Your father was very grateful to Hillary, who devotedly cared for him despite having no blood relation. He considered it a way to express his gratitude. Father. I felt deeply moved by my father-in-law's thoughtfulness. What's that? I thought we could have an easy life with the inheritance. Mandy twisted her face in frustration. The lawyer then revealed that my father-in-law had also left in his will that all his debts should be inherited by Daniel. But it seemed that the distraught Daniel and Mandy hardly heard this. Tears began to flow from my eyes as I was filled with gratitude towards my father-in-law. Thank you, Father. Seeing me cry, the two of them seemed to grow even angrier. But the lawyer sternly concluded, that is the content of the will. I'm not happy about losing half, But at least we still have the other half, thanks to the law. Daniel said this and patted Mandy on the shoulder, who then nodded, seemingly relieved, right. Well, this is.
Goodbye.
Then. We won't be dealing with you again, have a nice life. As the two of them left with loud laughter, I returned to Ben's house, cherishing my father-in-law's last act of kindness. 2 months had passed since I received the inheritance. Anne was working at Ben's without any issues when I received a call from Daniel one Sunday. Ben and I were enjoying a day off at home when my mobile phone rang loudly. Daniel. The atmosphere froze between Ben and me when we realized it was Daniel calling. Why is he calling? After he abandoned us, what does he want now? You don't have to answer. Despite Ben's advice, the persistent calls continued, so I answered the phone to silence Daniel. What's the matter, calling so many times? Didn't you say you'd never deal with me again? I spoke in an annoyed tone, but Daniel ignored my words and began speaking frantically. Hey, what's going on? Why are you working at Ben's company? And why is Ben's company on TV? They even showed his house. How does he live in such a grand place? His voice was frenzied, and even Ben frowned next to me. Oh, you saw the TV then? I realized why Daniel had suddenly called. Recently, a TV station had covered the sports gym that Ben managed, airing it yesterday. Ben's gym, a unique concept combining a gym and a cafe, had caught the TV station's interest. Since opening, membership had skyrocketed, and Ben had appeared on TV, successfully introducing his large home as Daniel mentioned. I was living in Ben's so-called mansion, a spacious house standing out among its neighbors. That's why Daniel, having seen Ben's house on TV, was so shocked. How come you guys live in such a big house? Over here, Mandy has spent all of my father's inheritance. And I'm left with his debts. Damn, I didn't hear anything about these debts from the lawyer. Daniel ranted bitterly. But the lawyer had indeed informed him about inheriting the debts. It wasn't my fault he hadn't paid attention. Well, that's not my concern. You were informed by the lawyer, and it's your responsibility for not checking. You knew about Mandy's spending habits since before your marriage. I even gave her money for treatment, and she hasn't paid me back. Now I understand. Both you and Mandy are the worst kind of people. Quick to betray someone you should trust. Grr. He was speechless at my valid point. Besides, you started all this by cheating, didn't you? Why should I be blamed for anything? After venting my frustration, I felt somewhat relieved. Realizing his accusations were futile, Daniel suddenly pleaded. Please, Hillary, lend me some money. I was supposed to retire this year and get my retirement pay. But I was fired, and all I'm left with is my father's debt. Mandy and I fought over money, and she left. How am I supposed to live now? You're the only one I can rely on. I was wrong about everything. I apologize. Please, could you spare me some of my father's inheritance? You're living a good life with Ben, right? Think of it as helping someone out, okay? To think he'd stoop so low as to beg for money from an ex-wife he cheated on was beyond understanding. Ben, having overheard the conversation, looked at me as if he had something to say. I handed him the phone, and he turned on the speaker and addressed Daniel. Dad, you betrayed Mom and married my aunt, right? Since I was born, I heard you never took care of me. I don't have any memories of playing with you. It was always just me and Mom. She was the only one who came to my school events and sports days. That's why she's the only parent I acknowledge. And why she's living with me and helping with my company. Why should I lend money to a father who's never done anything for me? I won't give you a single penny. Ben spoke firmly, like a true businessman. I was overwhelmed by emotion. On the other end, Daniel gasped. Ben, how can you say that to your father? Fine, I won't rely on you two ever again. Don't underestimate me. With that, Daniel ended the call. Ben and I stared at the silent phone, then burst into laughter at the absurdity of the situation. Can you believe him? Begging for money and then saying he wants nothing to do with us. How ridiculous.
Yeah.
Dad always loses his head when he gets angry and never thinks things through. As we were talking about Daniel's foolishness, the phone rang again. It was Daniel. Despite saying he wouldn't involve himself with us, he probably wanted to beg for money again. Annoyed, I blocked Daniel's contact. That's it. Now that fool truly can't involve himself with us anymore.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mom. Thank you. I sensed not just gratitude for today, but for raising him almost single-handedly all these years. I'm the one who should be thankful. You've provided such a good life for us. No matter how old you get, you're still my precious son. We affirmed our bond as mother and son, grateful for each other's presence in our spacious home. A few days later, I received a call from my sister, Mandy. Her message was almost identical to what Daniel had said. I couldn't imagine lending more money to Mandy, who hadn't even repaid what she owed. In fact, I hadn't yet demanded compensation for her affair with Daniel. So I used this opportunity to successfully sue both of them for damages through a lawyer. As a result, they were even more burdened with debt and, perhaps as expected, ended up divorcing. Their marriage had lasted only 2 months. Daniel's situation turned out to be even more miserable. He had inherited substantial debts from my father-in-law. Apparently, my father-in-law had borrowed a lot of money to keep his farm running. Struggling alone with the finances, something I hadn't known. While I was caring for him, he often complained about Daniel, who had not only refused to take over the farm but also neglected Ben and never visited home. He was furious with Daniel's attitude toward me, and I always tried to calm him down. Considering how angry my kind father-in-law was, Daniel must have been a terribly irresponsible son. The only solace Daniel had, his retirement pay, vanished when he was dismissed for disciplinary reasons. Rumor has it that he tried to embezzle money from the bank he worked at to pay off his debts. If he had worked quietly until the end, he would have received his retirement pay. But blinded by immediate greed, Daniel's foolishness knew no bounds. Now, at 65, he's working multiple part-time jobs to pay off his debts. Starting new work at this age, especially for someone who's never done household chores, childcare, or elder care, must be a huge blow to his pride. Considering how he neglected his son's upbringing and continued an affair with Mandy for years, I think it's a fitting punishment. He should keep striving until the end. As for me, I'm still working energetically at Ben's company. The staff, who are as old as my children, treat me very kindly. It's a workplace where smiles never cease, and that's why customers keep coming. Ben recently got engaged to a girl a year younger than him and introduced her to me. She's a wonderful, sensible lady, well respected by everyone at work. I had planned to move out once they married, but she insisted that we live together. Grateful for her kindness, I'm looking forward to our life together as a family of 3. Oh, is that you, Gina? While having coffee with my family at a cafe, I turned around at the sound of that voice and there was my ex-husband, Ryan. And next to him was Alyssa, the woman who took this man from me. Huh? What, you got married? I just glared at him in silence. Then he said, "Oh, I see. Is the infertile defective still single? Are you planning to remarry with someone who also has children from a previous marriage? You two would be a good match." Ryan seemed to find this very amusing. I slammed the table and stood up. Excuse me? Who did you say is infertile? What, isn't that the case? Just kidding again. Ryan laughed mockingly. We felt sick and left the cafe. At that moment, two girls who seemed to be daughters passed by. Ms. Anderson, one of the girls shouted as she ran towards me, panting. I'm Megan, your daughter. I have something very important to tell you. She was desperate to get her point across. My name is Gina Anderson, I'm 45 years old. I live with my husband Nathan, who is 3 years younger than me, our daughter Sarah, and my in-laws, making us a family of 5. Nathan is a chef, and I work in a sort of sales job. Both of us tend to be workaholics. I sometimes worry that this makes Sarah feel somewhat lonely, as she is only 12. However, my in-laws live with us and are understanding of our work, treating Sarah kindly and sometimes strictly, which allows us to dedicate ourselves to our jobs. And on the rare days off we have together, Nathan showcases his excellent cooking. Sarah envies his skills, and whenever possible, she learns cooking from Nathan. I could never have imagined 17 years ago that such happy days would come my way. Nathan is my second husband. I divorced 17 years ago. My ex-husband was Ryan Irving, a senior colleague who was 5 years older. In my 20s, I moved departments from sales to general affairs after getting married, continuing to work while being a housewife. Back then, I thought we had a reasonably good marriage, or so I believed. But one day, out of the blue, Ryan told me he wanted a divorce. Why all of a sudden? Stunned, I stood before the divorce papers he thrust in front of me, not understanding what was happening. Then, Ryan's expression turned more serious than ever before. You know, we've never been able to have kids, right? I was shocked. Ryan had never mentioned such a thing since we got married. However, his mother often pressed the issue. I had lived with my in-laws for the 3 years of our marriage, and was constantly nagged about when we would have children. But I thought I had managed to keep Ryan from noticing his mother's attitude. I was also concerned about our inability to have children. However, I felt that rushing into fertility treatments wouldn't immediately change our situation. Things would happen when they could. That was what I believed. But I was naive. Are you divorcing me because I can't have children? That's not the only reason. At that moment, I had a bad feeling. Hey, remember Alyssa? Of course I do. She was in my sales department. What about her? Just as a thought crossed my mind, Ryan spoke up. Well, Alyssa is pregnant with my child now. What? I was at a loss for words at that moment. This news was completely unexpected to me. I hadn't known that Ryan was having an affair, let alone with Alyssa, my former junior. I can't accept that you want a divorce just because you have a child with someone else. I argued with all my might. But Ryan calmly said this. But Mom agrees with it. At that moment, I realized where the discussion had originated from. When I asked to confirm, right? I'm supporting him, and Alyssa, my mother-in-law, answered simply. Why is that? Doesn't it mean that Ryan cheated? How can you tolerate that? Yes, I can forgive that. I was lost for words at her response. Because you haven't shown any signs of having children. I've been worried about it all this time. That is. Indeed, from her perspective, it could be seen as a concern. After all, you two didn't say you weren't trying to have kids. So, it must be a problem on your side. Ryan continued. See, I told you. Mom wants to see her grandchild. And since there was no sign of that happening with you, it's natural, isn't it? Saying this, Ryan presented the divorce papers to me, who was stunned in disbelief. I quickly resigned myself to the fact that I no longer had a place anywhere. Signed the divorce papers. Looking back, I should have demanded a proper division of assets and compensation at that time. But at that moment, I was not in a state to make rational decisions. At work, the news of the divorce and its reasons spread quickly. Meanwhile, Alyssa quit her job and seemed to easily settle into being a housewife upon getting pregnant and giving birth. As for me, instead of being seen as the unfortunate woman who was cheated on, rumors spread that I was unattractive and had stolen her husband. Eventually, I resigned from the company. I could no longer bear the curious looks and gossip. And for a while, I holed up in a small room in a place where I had moved. But one can't live on nothing. As someone not particularly skilled in cooking, I went out on a whim. Drawn by the scent of stew from a small shop, I lingered over the menu for a long time until the cook asked, "What would you like?" It seems I had been looking at the menu for quite a long time. At that moment, I realized how tremendously tired I felt. As I ate, tears and sniffles involuntarily followed. Yet, the cook quietly placed extra napkins in front of me as I continued eating in silence. That cook was Nathan, my current husband. After that, I began visiting the restaurant frequently and eventually started dating Nathan. Despite being older and divorced, our feelings for each other did not change, and we got married. Soon after our marriage, I discovered I was pregnant with our daughter, Sarah. Unlike my former mother-in-law, my new in-laws were very kind. I am truly grateful to my current in-laws, who cherish me like their own daughter as my family is far away. They even said if I ever wanted to work because staying at home all the time was depressing, I should do so without hesitation. I started helping out in the restaurant where Nathan worked, taking over the accounting part, which the owner disliked. Years later, the owner fell ill and retired, and Nathan, whose skills had always been recognized, took over the restaurant. Over the next decade, our work and parenting went smoothly. One day, Nathan, Sarah, and I were cafe hopping. For Nathan and me, it was half fun, half study. We discussed things like how nice the menu was, or whether some places should consider smaller sizes. "Hey, is that you, Gina?" I turned around at the sound of that voice, and there was Ryan, a man I had nearly forgotten. And next to him was, "Ah, it really is Ms. Anderson. Remember me? It's Alyssa." A woman, perhaps unbecomingly young at heart, calling out in a cutesy voice. Alyssa was there. She must be 40 by now, already middle-aged, yet dressed and made up in a way that felt a bit out of place. "Long time no see," I replied in a stiff voice. Nathan and Sarah looked a bit anxious hearing my tone. Then, Ryan pressed on. "Huh? What, you got married?" I glared at him silently. Then he said, "Oh, I see. Is the infertile defective still single? Are you planning to remarry with someone who also has children from a previous marriage? You two would be a good match." Ryan seemed to find this very amusing. Nathan and Sarah looked bewildered by his off-target remarks. I slammed the table and stood up. "Excuse me? Who did you say is infertile?" "Oh? Ms. Anderson, why are you suddenly getting angry? What, isn't that the case? You married someone with a child because you can't have your own. What is wrong with these people?" Pointing to Nathan and Sarah, I firmly clarified. "That's not true. I married this man a long time ago, and this child is my own." "Oh, come on, stop joking." Ryan said this with a laugh. I was appalled. Why does he insist on thinking I'm infertile? "Shall we leave this place?" Nathan suggested, looking at me. Sarah also looked uneasy. "Yes, let's go. It's upsetting to even see them." "Oh, really? Then a seat's going to free up here. Hey, come on over." As we headed to the exit, A girl who looked about high school age approached somewhat plumply.
Ah,
I see, that must be the child who was in Alyssa's belly back then. As I passed by the girl, I thought this fleetingly. Let's forget about this place and eat somewhere nearby. Yes, let's enjoy some drinks properly this time. We checked our map. That's when it happened. Ms. Anderson, the same girl shouted as she ran towards me, panting. I'm Megan, your daughter. I have something very important to tell you. She was desperate to get her point across. And that was the first step that would change our fate. 6 months later, I was visiting a certain building. My destination was a company on an upper floor. Excuse me, I'm Gina Anderson, scheduled to meet with Mr. Owen, the sales director. Thank you for waiting, Ms. Anderson. The receptionist began, then paused, looking surprised. Could it be Ms. Holmes? Mr. Owen, the sales director, called me by my maiden name. Indeed, this was the company where I used to work. Yes, it's been a while, Mr. Owen. I smiled at my former boss. So, you're moving into the tenant space downstairs? Yes, it's my store. Oh. Wow. Mr. Owen exaggerated his surprise a bit. I'm really sorry about back then. I couldn't do anything. Mr. Owen, you were in a different department at that time. And I don't think you could have stopped those tactless people.
yeah.
That's true. But I feel bad about the unpleasant experiences you had. I was his boss, after all. Just then, Ryan, who seemed to have returned from a sales call, entered the floor. What? Why are you here? Did you come because you ran into me the other day? I just silently watched Ryan making his light-hearted comments. Does he realize his boss is nearby? Hey, you're not thinking about getting back together with me, are you? Hey, what are you saying? Mr. Owen said this, calming Ryan down. It seemed that Ryan finally realized I was with his boss. He quickly apologized. Ms. Anderson is here today for a business discussion. A business discussion? At that point, I spoke up to the surprised Ryan. Remember the tenant space on the first floor that's been vacant for a while? Oh,
Yeah.
my store will be moving in there. Ryan looked puzzled. Wait a minute. Isn't that space supposed to be taken by that famous coffee chain? Right, Mr. Owen? I turned the conversation over to Mr. Owen. Yes, that's right. Everyone's been looking forward to that store moving in. So what, you joined the sales department of that chain? No. I paused and then continued. It's my store. Ryan made an even more confused face. Hey, Ryan, I don't know what you're misunderstanding. But didn't I tell you that today's visitor is Ms. Anderson, the owner of that chain? The owner? He exclaimed, looking back and forth between Mr. Owen and me, sweat forming on his forehead. Look, Ryan. Today is strictly about business. Don't be rude. Sorry about that, Ms. Anderson. No worries. Although today is about business. I actually wanted everyone here to try our coffee. As soon as I said this, the entire floor reacted. Wait, are you treating us to coffee from that shop? The young office lady was quick to react. Yes, that's right. I hope you will become our most valued customers. And I look forward to a long relationship with all of you. Today, I'd like to offer a little preview before we open. Please feel free to visit our store later. Is that okay with you, Mr. Owen? I looked at him. Yes, let's gladly accept the invitation. Let's all go down. Then, almost everyone on the floor, except those who stayed behind on duty, descended together. Welcome, said the manager of the new store, greeting. Looking forward to working with you, the waiting staff bowed in unison to greet the employees. Please, everyone, go ahead, I said. And the employees began to find their seats with youthful eagerness. Our coffee isn't particularly unique in itself. It's more affordable and simpler than a certain famous coffee shop known for its lavish toppings. And what we sell are straightforward menus and delicious meals. You can have a takeaway lunch if you wish, and for dinner, when you're willing to spend a bit more for something tasty. That's the kind of menu that made our first store flourish. After prospering, I trained staff and expanded our stores. And now I'm the president of a coffee chain with an annual revenue of $50 million. Well, how about this table over here for you folks? I invited Mr. Owen, Ryan, and a few others to a table somewhat apart from the rest. Then, a few people got up there. What? Ryan was surprised by their presence. Wait a minute, Megan, why are you here? Why? Well, Megan snickered through her nose and continued. Because I'm a guest today, too. But, isn't this place only for staff and related persons right now? Ryan hurriedly responded. But I'm a related person today, too. Oh, and by the way, Dad. Actually, my real father is here, too. Ryan seemed not to understand his daughter's words immediately. Megan ignored her father's confused look and continued. Let me introduce him. This is Mr. Ted Morris, my real father. Ryan looked even more baffled. I guess you wouldn't understand, Dad. We need one more guest to come here. With that, Megan turned towards the display window. Through it, a woman was looking around and quickly walking towards us. It was Alyssa, dressed as youthfully as when we reunited 6 months ago. Alyssa hurriedly opened the door and said, Megan, as she rushed over. Look, the other guest has arrived. Mom, this way, Megan said in a calm tone. Alyssa turned toward us and quickly approached, then suddenly looked shocked. Megan, why are you Ted? Alyssa asked with a trembling voice. Why? Because he's my father, too, Megan replied, standing firm before her stunned mother. Ryan seemed to finally understand the situation. Hey, Alyssa, do you know anything about this? Do you have any connection with this man? I don't know him. I don't know this man at all. While shaking her head vigorously, Alyssa tried to leave, but Nathan and I stopped her. Since you've come all this way, how about a cup of coffee? I suggested, offering Alyssa a seat and asking the staff to bring coffee. Right, the coffee here has been very popular recently. You really should have at least 1 cup before you go. Megan said, practically forcing her mother to sit down. What a brave young lady, only 16 years old. Yes, that day, Megan chased after us and brought up her concerns. The reason was, she had heard that I was once the wife of her father. When we sat down again at the cafe, Megan's consultation was this. Someone claiming to be her real father had come to her. I heard that Ms. Anderson divorced my dad because I was born. From whom? From Grandma. My former mother-in-law. Did she really need to tell her granddaughter such things? It was very like her, I thought. Did you talk about this with anyone else? I asked her that, but she replied, I haven't talked to anyone. Is it okay to talk to me about such an important matter, almost a stranger? Didn't you talk to your mom? It's fine. I don't trust my mom, especially when it comes to relationships with men. Megan stated this bluntly. Because I can't trust my mom, I thought maybe this person could really be my real dad. She was referring to Ted Morris, with whom we were sitting today. At first, she spoke with doubt, but it seems she became convinced by the gifts he mentioned. Ever since I was little, my mom would suddenly give me expensive clothes or accessories. But only when my dad was away on business trips. As a child, she just felt happy to receive these special gifts. But as she grew older, she began to sense something was off. During a conversation with Mr. Morris, she asked if he had ever sent her gifts. Mr. Morris immediately smiled, pleased, asking if she had received them. Further questioning revealed that Mr. Morris remembered the contents and timing of those gifts well, and they matched exactly with Megan's memories. So I asked for a DNA test with him. When I heard this, I thought she was a very brave girl to initiate such a matter. But saying such things, what do you think about your dad and mom? I don't care about my dad. He hardly ever comes home. And I don't know if it's because of work or something else.
Ah.
So Ryan had become an indifferent parent after all. Despite using the presence of children as a reason to divorce me. Just as I thought this, Megan's next words surprised me. As for my mom, I'm not sure if they're dating, but there's a man she likes who isn't my dad. Just the other day, they came home together in a taxi. Her words sounded bitterly ironic. But you came to the cafe with your family recently, didn't you? That was just a show, dragged there under the guise of a family outing by my dad. In contrast, your family seemed happy. She said this with a touch of sadness. Excuse me for asking, but are you sure Sarah isn't your stepdaughter? Absolutely not. This child is my own. I firmly said this, embracing Sarah. Then at that time, my dad was really rude to you, wasn't he? I've always heard about it. Yes. In the past, your father and grandmother pushed me into divorce. But after I remarried, I had this child immediately and have been living happily ever since. I had completely forgotten about your family, to be honest. I couldn't even remember their faces right away. Is that so? I'm envious. Hearing this made me want to help her. It seemed that their family was still twisted in some way. Over the past 6 months, I attended meetings between Mr. Morris and Megan. And ultimately, we arranged this meeting. It's been a really long time, Alyssa. Mr. Morris said this with a smile. I don't know anything about you. Alyssa said this in a rush. Well, I might have changed a lot too. But DNA doesn't change. Then Mr. Morris presented the DNA test results to Ryan and Alyssa. Both took the report and looked at it intently. What they saw confirmed that Megan was not related to Ryan as a parent. But she was almost certainly Mr. Morris's daughter. Upon understanding this, Ryan suddenly looked at Alyssa, his face turning pale. Alyssa, seeing his expression, panicked. No, this is a fake, a forgery. Then you should test as many times as you need. Though I think it will be the same no matter how many times you do it. In fact, here are the results from several tests. He casually produced more documents, presumably from another facility. Alyssa then lunged at Megan. How could you do this? What are you talking about? Where did you come from today, Mom? What are you talking about? Megan then rummaged through her bag, pulled out her smartphone, and started doing something on it. Soon, she turned the screen towards Alyssa. I got this sent to me. Displayed were images of Alyssa entering and leaving a hotel with another man. This must be a fake picture. It has to be. No, it's not. How can you say that? I am saying that because I want to take this child from you guys. You can't do that. Alyssa exclaimed. I can if this parent-child relationship is proven. Also, hey, Ryan, can you really endure knowing she has been deceiving you about your paternity? Ryan choked up. Cuckoldry, you say? At his voice, the nosy office ladies around started whispering. Yes, I intentionally invited company staff here to expose this turmoil. Mr. Owen intervened, trying to calm the office ladies, and approached us. Ryan, what in the world is going on here? I don't understand myself. I would like to know too. Sweat glistened on Ryan's forehead. But Ryan, you left Ms. Anderson to marry your current wife. And now you're causing trouble at home again? That's not very fitting for someone of your age and position. What do you mean? Ryan looked around frantically, and suddenly, he shouted, "Stop looking at me." In reality, no one was openly staring at him. Everyone was sneakily glancing at him. But for Ryan, those felt like piercing gazes. What is going on? What should we do? Alyssa, seeing her suddenly distraught husband, also showed signs of agitation. Well, it's time for you to come forward. It's your turn. Mr. Morris signaled, and a man from a distant table approached. This is the lawyer I have hired. I am ready to dispute the recognition and custody of the child. What about you? Ryan was lost for words, frozen on the spot. And Mr. Morris continued to press him relentlessly. Is there something wrong? You have been raising another man's child all this time. Doesn't that bother you? It bothers me, yes, it does. But if we didn't have children, my mother would.
Ah.
That's right. I exclaimed without thinking. You've always been weak to your mother, haven't you? The murmurs around us seemed to grow a little louder. I could hear office ladies whispering, so Ryan was a mama's boy, huh? Megan, what do you want to do? You won't betray me, your father, right? Ryan's voice was desperate, and Megan tilted her head, contemplating. Honestly, I don't really care either way. Ryan seemed genuinely shocked by her words. Perhaps he did love his daughter in his own way. That made her indifference all the more piercing. You know, Dad, you're just too oblivious. Not just about Mom, but about me too. What do you mean? I mean, I've been meeting with this dad here for over 6 months. You didn't know anything, did you? I knew you weren't interested in me. Maybe because you were busy with work. But not even noticing Mom's affair? What were you working for? Sweat began to trickle down Ryan's forehead to his cheeks. Now, you shouldn't say that. It was Mr. Morris who calmed the situation. But I get it. Even if I disappeared, this dad wouldn't run around for me but for Grandma. You always say, oh, you did well in school, Grandma will be happy. Or being smart must run in our family, never mentioning Mom's side of the family. Alyssa turned away from her daughter, clearly upset. So, Dad, you wanted a child just for Grandma's sake, right? What do you say? Ryan was at a loss for words. Megan looked a bit sad and said to Mr. Morris, see, this is what he's like. At that moment, Alyssa suddenly shouted. Megan. What are you saying? Dad has been working hard every day for us. And Mom, you're the one who's been betraying him without any trouble, aren't you? You didn't notice either, right? Well, it makes sense, I wasn't home much. And when I brought it up, Mr. Morris here confirmed it. Confirmed. Yes, replied the lawyer. I was asked by Mr. Morris to investigate your affair. We hired a detective agency and gathered solid evidence. Those photos earlier are just a part of it. Sigh. What a mess. Mr. Owen sighed as he watched the chaos unfold. To think you'd stir up all this at once. Ryan, you were excellent at your job, but you can't even keep your family together. No, but that's not. It's not my fault. Ryan's voice grew weaker. Mr. Morris pressed further. So, what will you do? As I said earlier, I am ready to fight. As he spoke, Ryan staggered and then collapsed. Call an ambulance, call an ambulance. The scene erupted into chaos. It seemed Ryan couldn't handle everything that had suddenly come to light. It can't be helped. Well, let's talk about this slowly, Mr. Morris said kindly. Then suddenly, Alyssa turned to Mr. Morris and snapped. You've really made it, haven't you? Using lawyers and detectives. You've come a long way from back then. That's true. Mr. Morris responded as if it were obvious. Because I got rid of a gold-digging curse like you. I now have better finances, a better job, and a wonderful wife. Hearing this, Alyssa's shoulders slumped right there. I'm sorry for causing a scene. Please enjoy your time. I smiled at the office ladies who were curiously looking over. Soon after, Ryan and Alyssa ended up divorcing. The former mother-in-law was furious with Alyssa. There were two reasons. One was obviously the cuckolding, but another was that tests revealed that her beloved son, Ryan, was infertile. Ryan's failure to investigate this himself had infuriated his mother. After the storm settled, he seemed to age all at once. He even began to show early signs of dementia. It became clear that he would need care. Ryan, having caused family strife in his youth and now again, was criticized for his lack of managerial skills, and was pushed into a less demanding role by Mr. Owen. But honestly, that menial job was probably all he could handle now. His mental health had deteriorated after the shocks. Having always believed he was right, he was shattered by the revelation that I was not infertile. That he was the one without fertility, and most of all, that his daughter whom he thought loved him had easily written him off. All these things had snapped what had been his confident demeanor in the social sphere. After the divorce, Alyssa tried to go to the man she had an affair with. But he desperately claimed it was a one-night stand, that he didn't know she was married, or that he didn't know her real age, and managed to escape. It turns out Alyssa had been lying about her age by 10 years. When she told him her real age, the man's reaction was nauseating, according to the lawyer. Once she realized she had been abandoned, Alyssa tried to turn to her parents. But they refused her, and she was left with nowhere to go. After that, Alyssa simply vanished. What could a woman who had been a housewife all her life, sneaking around her mother-in-law and having affairs, do? Well, she should just sink as low as she goes. As for Megan, she was taken in by her biological father, Ted, and his wife. They pleaded with her to live with them for at least a little while, even though she was almost an adult. This was because Ted's wife had been unable to have children. Over 6 months, Megan had gotten to know her and they had grown close. She deserved a happy life, free of any wrongdoing. Since then, and perhaps because of the little scandal, the new store flourished. We also became good friends with the company upstairs. To the office ladies, the wife who was divorced and fought to become the president of a chain store was something of an aspiration. It makes me blush to hear it, but I think how times have changed. And occasionally, Sarah, my daughter, and Megan exchange messages. It's a strange twist of fate, but children can make friends in such unexpected ways. Even though their mothers were almost enemies, the kids themselves had nothing to do with it. Nathan looks at them with a warm expression. As I cherish this family, I plan to keep working hard and keep focusing on my happiness and my home.